Hello, and welcome to the next module on interpersonal communication. As we talked about before in previous modules, we reviewed the notion that communication is a process. It is actually a delicate set of rules and procedures that once you unravel it, it can be a bit intimidating and complicated. But when you look at it from an interpersonal perspective, you're really looking at the inner core of a person, and you are reframing the intent and the messaging of your communication. So as a review, we discussed the purpose of communication, the definition of communication, characteristics, as well as communication models. We also talked about the definition of interpersonal communication, and as such, the models that represent that construct of communication as well. Now we are going to talk about the principles of interpersonal communication. I know, it's like, does communication have to be this intense? Well, it is, because there are very, very important constructs, theories, and methodologies of interpersonal communication that if more people understood, then maybe there would be less conflict in the world, there would be less opportunities for arguments, misunderstandings, and a lot of people would choose their friends wisely before even going into a relationship. So, as we move to the principles of interpersonal communication, I want you to understand that there are a lot of theories, there are a lot of rhetorical research and scholarly thought on communication. But if you remember that the core of communication is remembering who you are and feeling comfortable with what you bring to that communicative experience, the rest will fall into place. So let's talk about the fact that communication is rule governed. What do we mean by that when we say communication is rule governed? Well, communication follows certain rules. For example, when we talk about the linear model upon which a sender sends the message to the receiver and the receiver then receives the message, that linear model considers the fact of the communicative rule that the receiver receives the message, and that's the end of it. That's the end of the communicative channel. Now, some examples of what that looks like when we look at the rules that govern communication, particularly in the linear model, is parent to child. It's a relationship that's dictated by respect or cultural rules, or even what's appropriate in a professional setting. So we understand that in order for people to know what to do in communicative situations or how to perceive what the other has done, there are certain unspoken rules that maybe you've not even considered a rule. You just know that this is something culturally that we do, or to speak right now would be considered rude, right? So we must understand that there are a lot of just syntax rules that circle around and govern communication. Now, another rule example is when someone asks you a question. If you fail to respond, then that too indicates in a regular communicative manner that the person is disinterested, or in some cultures is seen as a sign of disrespect. But in other cultures, you're not expected to answer because what you say goes, right? From the sender to the receiver. Now, it's interesting because now we flow into the conversation that communication is culturally defined. Many cultures in communication understand that there are rules. Family culture, religious culture, regional cultures, it could be racial or ethnic cultures, professional cultures, national cultures, as well as other cultures, like even like the culture of two roommates just moving in with one another and you wanting to make your roommate feel comfortable and you wanting this roommate relationship to work. For instance, communication is different there because you want to make sure that you have an environment of that person feeling comfortable and an environment of smooth communicative flow. Now, an example of cultures is when we consider that the cultures we come from provide us with complex rules on how we are to act within the method and a modality of communication, as well as how we are to interpret the other person's messaging to us. For example, when I, in my culture, the way I was raised, am having communicative exchanges with someone else, whether that person is older than I or not, it's Miss. So or it's Mr. And it's their first name. It's like a Southern rule, right? I know I am was raised in the South. Henceforth my cowboy boots, perhaps, I don't know. But whenever, even now, I'm wise. I've aged, okay? We won't put my age on this video for aging video purposes, but if you ask me face to face, I will clearly tell you how old I am. I have no qualms about my age, but I want this video to be in perpetuity. I want to be 105 in this video, still be hot and popping. Okay, but in any event, we're talking about communication. In my profession, when I'm talking with one of my clients' parents and they're clearly younger than I am, I say Miss. I say Mr. and their first name. So this is just an example of how communication is culturally determined, or it's ethnically determined, or it's regionally determined, because that is definitely something from the South that we do. So let's continue to talk about the fact that just these two rules alone are super important, because if you don't understand the culture of the person that you're communicating with, it could be a little rocky. Now, of course, we don't know the cultural background of everyone we talk to. So there's certain rules that we just simply abide by to make sure that we aren't offending anyone. So when we talk about the contextual meaning of messages, it's super important to remember that as we talk about how to be a leader in communication and how to be a pro at interpersonal communication, you must understand the cultural nuances that are in play when you're speaking with someone. So when we talk about the meaning of messages, we have to understand that it is within the contextual realm. In order to understand the meaning in a message in a communicative encounter, you must have a sense of the context. Well, what does that mean? So, for instance, when I greet some of my international friends when I'm traveling, I know that some of them I approach and we kiss on each cheek. It's just a given. And that's just courtesy. If you don't, then it's rude. So understanding that meaning of messages is contextual, that's an example upon which it's contextual. I can tell you right now, I can walk in Center City in Philly and see someone I know and hug them, and if I kiss them on both sides and they're not international, they're not an international person, that's not the region that they're from, they're gonna look at me like I'm crazy. That's just the way it is. I walk in urban Baltimore and I see someone that I may have met at a conference and I kiss them on both cheeks. No, that's just not gonna happen unless they are of an international background. Okay, certain context is appropriate, others not. Let's talk about this too. In an instance where a kiss also in some cultures is acceptable on the lips to greet and to say hello. So again, understand that communication has to be considered within the context upon which that communication is occurring, with a consideration and a not acknowledgement to the cultural nuances that are in play. So interpretation of communication is more than just intent. It is important to understand how one interprets a behavior than it is to understand what one intended to communicate. Let me explain. When we intend to communicate one thing, however, it's received and interpreted as another manner, that skews the entire process of a communication. And we're talking about being a communicator, being a communicative leader, that cuts into your profit margin. So when we talk about why is interpersonal communication important, it will make or break a business meeting. It can set a high performance team back weeks because someone was offended in a meeting in which something was conveyed across. And if it was found or deemed to be offensive, now you find yourself in the shoes of HR. Not worth it. Not worth it at all. So when we talk about interpretation of communication is more important than intent, you may intend one thing, but let me tell you, if it's interpreted another way, you could even face a lawsuit. So you have to be mindful of how the person interprets your behavior or your communicative method or even what you say. Let's also talk about the fact that communication is permanent. It is permanent. It is irreversible and is unrepeatable. So when we talk about freezing an instance in time, and we speak upon the fact that once you've had a communicative encounter with someone, you are never the same person. You are not the same person that you were 15 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago, or 3 seconds ago. Because communication changes and evolves in that moment, in that instance, in that second of time. It changes that person's perspectives, feelings, emotions, thoughts, their needs, their desires, their drives, their wants, their perception, their perspective. It changes all of that. Whether you're a student, a leader, a lover, a friend, a colleague, a companion. So every moment, every word, every instance is irreversible and irrepeatable and can't be repeated. Like, you can't change it. If you say something and you don't mean it and it hurts, you have to really rewind that situation and then nestle it and surround it with a better understanding so that it can soften that moment. But that moment will never be forgotten. Remember that. So that's why it's super important to understand that you can't take back what you say. You can't undo it. A lot of times we say, I didn't mean that, or forget I said that, or let's not talk about that. It's already out in that moment, in that instance in time, ingrained in the receiver's head, and that's done. A lot of relationships, business, partnered, end on words, severed on words. It is bruised, beaten, tarnished on words. Parents need to know that when we have kids, or when they have kids, kids don't come with rule books, and you aren't really taught how to communicate with a kid who's developing, who will remember what you say. Excuse me. So it's super important that as communicators, as leaders and communication, because I am producing leaders. If you're watching this video, whatever schematic you're watching it in, I'm producing a pro communicator in you. It's important to know that you can't repeat communication any more than we can step in the same river twice. That is a Chinese proverb. So again, know that every moment counts, every thought counts. So before you think it, say it, let it cross your vocal box and roll off your tongue. Let's get that interpersonal communication straight with you and in your core. So effective interpersonal communication requires meta communication. I love it. What is meta communication? Our relationships are not static entities. They're a product of communication we have with our relational partners. What we are communicate in every real sense. When someone says he has a bad relationship, he often means that he and his partner communicate in ways that are unpleasant, uncomfortable, or ineffective. Okay, so when we understand the importance that we have to recognize and repair poor communication, we must be able to communicate about our communication. How in the world can you communicate about your communication when you don't know what you're saying and you're learning that now there's a whole dynamic and a process and procedure and rules about communication that no one ever told you about until you took this course? Aren't you happy you took this course? Aren't you happy you're in this module? Oh my goodness. How much money am I saving you from like distraught work relationships, personal relationships? How much money am I saving in a divorce right now? Let's keep going. We must use meta communication. The purpose is for you to understand how to effectively communicate in any situation that you may find yourself in. Any situation. So when we talk about meta communication, it's important to slow down and understand every single process of communication. Your intent, your purpose, your feelings, your thoughts. Where did that thought come from? Was that thought really your mama's thought that you just said? Or was it your daddy's thought you just said to your partner to hurt their feelings? Let's continue. The medium of interpersonal communication can signify impact, meaning, and relationship. Well, what does that mean? We live in a world of mediated communication, with a significant portion of our communication occurring on or impacted by the social and conventional media, in which it's transmitted through. Media is technological, and it can alter the nature of what we intend to say. So understand that even the medium of interpersonal communication can significantly impact the exact meaning and the exact relationship. I remember texting, I'm so sorry I did this, texting one of my clients, and I sent her an emoji, and she had no clue what the emoji meant. And she thought the emoji was offensive. And I'm like, no, I didn't mean to offend you. It took forever and a gift card to let her know that I wasn't mad at her. Okay, I don't mind the gift card because it was Starbucks, and you know, I love Starbucks points, but still, why have it happen? Social media, technology. We're going to talk about that too, because as we move forward and technology is introduced not only in our personal relationships, but also our professional relationships, as leaders who are leveraging technology to save time, to save money, and increase the bottom line of profitability, it's important to know how to communicate even across different modalities of media. So let's wrap this party up with this module by talking about the fact that communication just doesn't end when you shut your mouth. Communication just doesn't end when you're home and you're not around anyone and you're having some self-care time. Communication is ongoing. It's not something that simply occurs when you go and hang out with your friends. So the last thing I want to talk about is how should you approach communication? Communication is not a stop and a go process. It's what many researchers and scholars call a lifespan approach. The lifetime of a human is what encapsulates communication. So when we talk about just talking to someone and having a conversation and wondering why they don't get you or understand you, it could be because that person is at a different phase in their life. So we're going to also understand and learn that communication is just not a static moment in time upon which you are trying to have the other person, or you're trying to influence the other person with your thoughts, beliefs, your feelings, your notions, your beliefs. It's really a process upon which you and the people around you are evolving in different stages in life with different experiences each and every second, that moves and grows with us as we grow and develop into our future selves, into the next version of who we are. As I'm filming this module, when I stand up and go upstairs and watch football, like when I leave my office, I'm going to be a different person, period. Whether I trip up the steps or not, I'm going to be a different person, whether I may take the elevator to the next floor, because I may go to the upper floor. I will be a different person from even sharing this video with you. The thoughts that I have that are reflective of my day or the last 24 hours, heaven forbid, like, yeah, let's say if I trip up the steps, that's going to change everything in the way I communicate as well. If I get on the elevator, my elevator doesn't work, that's going to change everything, the way I feel every single second. I am evolving into a different version of myself. So understand you are doing the same thing. As we develop and change physically, mentally, emotionally from early infancy, our communication goals, patterns, and relationships also change with our lifetimes, with our experiences, with the fact that how we communicate and we connect with one another. It changes us. Each phase of our life, we use communication to achieve goals most critical at that time. We also learn new patterns of communication and we discard others as we grow. Do know that some people pick up arguing, some people drop it. Some people pick up raising their voice or changing their tone or putting a little bass behind it. Okay. And other people are like, forget about it. It's just not even relevant. It's just not helping me grow as a person. And I can't make any money off of it. So why even get mad? It's not, it's not making me money. That's the lifespan approach. Some of the things that piss you off when you're 20 will no longer piss you off when you're 50. Trust me. All right. So when we talk about the assumptions that are associated with a lifespan approach, we have to consider that development is lifelong. It's multi-directional. We've talked about the different pillars of who we are as self beings and the relationship we have with self. Understand that development is multi-directional across those pillars as we move up in the spectrum of communications and as our communication levels become a little mature. We age, okay? Also know that it's not only multi-directional, but it's multi-dimensional. So visualize this. Communication goes across, and then it takes a deep dive down into each pillar. As we progress and become better versions of ourselves, the next second forward, like that second over there, like you see it, like, look, that second right there. That's the next second of you becoming a different version of yourself. So when we also understand the lifespan approach, it also matters that you understand that these patterns are impacted by cultures. It's culturally impacting as you grow up to a different plateau, multi-dimensional, multi-directional. Your head's spinning now, right? So much information, you're just like, what if I just shut up? What if I just write notes? What if I just write notes? Then I don't have to learn all this stuff. No. You have to learn it because you can mess up communication with your note. Okay? Also understand that the concept of lifespan communication continues to change. I can tell you right now, in 1928, when some of the researchers and scholars who were like the bomb.coms in communication theories had no clue that social media was going to come and blow communication out of the water and create new methodologies and new research theories to ponder, right? Social media is TikTok just messed communication all up. Okay, for those theorists back, decades ago. Right now, we're like, communication is amazing with social media because we can say so much. We can be more expressive. We can express ourselves in ways we had no clue. And then we can see how different age brackets express themselves across social media, which is super cool. But do understand that the concept of lifespan is ever changing. It's ever changing. It's going to continue to change. Do understand that too, as it's evolving and social media is speeding up the platform upon which it's evolving, it's going to get sticky. How many of your parents or grandparents even know what TikTok is? Couldn't even visualize or understand how to move around in Twitter Spaces. Maybe by the time you see this module, you'll be like, oh, we're not even using Twitter Spaces anymore. Elon lost that battle with Twitter. But just as fast as I'm creating this video, that's the speed of communication. That's the speed of communicative change. And that's also the speed of the lifespan approach, and how many of the challenges in terms of communicating across generations or generationally is going to be challenged even greater because of the introduction of social media. That's just one example. So when we look at the different spectrums, I want to just give this to you before we end this module. Understand that there are different categories of lifespan. There's infancy through late childhood, which is from birth to 10 years. And then there's adolescence to early adult, which is around 11 to 17 to 17 to 22 years old of age. Then there's adulthood, which is considered at 23 to 55 years of age. And then there's elder years from 55 and older. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, that's what the scholars call it, elder years. I'm changing that. Stay tuned in the modules, because I just had to tell you that's what they call it, but I'm giving it another name. Because when I'm 55, you're not going to call me elderly. I'm not. So we're going to change that in these modules right now. We're going to set the tone. Because Duck and Vanzetti thought that it was a good idea in 1996 to call 55 and older elder. No, we're going to change that. I need to let them know that change is coming. So understand that those are the different categories. Understand that social media, we've talked about that, has a huge part on the transition and the flow of communication, and the fact that the impact of social media on communicative technology is totally changing the dynamics of intimacy and relationships and the relational context of communication with one another. So, as we wrap up this thought of communication being something bigger than just hi and thank you and bye and can I have that book and can you pass me that napkin, as we peel back the layers of seeing that communication is so much more, I want you to stay with me on this journey, because this is only the beginning. It's so important that we understand how important it is to improve the communication process by starting from within and understanding who we are before we show up to the communicative situation. Thank you for joining me in this module. I will see you the next module. Take care and keep communicating. It's the monkeys behind me. They see no evil, they hear no evil, and they speak no evil. That's because they took my course and they understand how to communicate on an interpersonal level. See you next course. Bye for now.